She was born with a crown in her cradle, but it came with a curse carved in blood. Imagine entering the world already trapped by your ancestors' choices, your health, your sanity, even your children's lives, all dictated by a royal obsession with bloodline purity. For centuries, kings and queens waged wars over borders, but guarded their family trees like treasure maps, marrying cousins, uncles, and even siblings. Not for love, not for loyalty, but for power. But power has a price, and it's paid in silence, deformity, madness, and grief. From gilded palaces to sterile nurseries, from embroidered wedding gowns to sealed tombs, the most inbred women in history weren't just victims of tradition, they were monuments to dynastic ambition. Some ruled empires, others barely survived childbirth, but all carried the same invisible burden, a legacy folded in on itself, generation after generation. And behind the glittering portraits and golden thrones lay the quiet horrors of genetic collapse. She was hailed as a saint, a symbol of devotion, even a healer of souls. But inside Maria I of Portugal, something was unraveling. Born in 1734 into the intertwined houses of Braganza and Bourbon, Maria's bloodline was already thick with cousin marriages. By the time she reached womanhood, her destiny was sealed. She would wed her father's younger brother, Infante Pedro, uniting the crown with itself once again. It wasn't scandalous, it was expected. Her wedding veil may have glistened with pearls, but her family tree was already fraying. The same names looped over and over again. And by the time she bore children, 6 in total, the signs had begun. 2 of her daughters died in infancy. One son suffered chronic seizures. Another showed signs of developmental delay. And as for Maria, her mind began to split. After the death of her husband, something inside her broke completely. She screamed through palace halls, sobbed through royal ceremonies, and hallucinated vividly. Voices from God, she claimed, told her to burn in penance. By 1792, she was declared insane. Her son ruled in her name. Her title remained, but her mind was gone. This wasn't divine punishment, it was biology. Psychiatrists today believe Maria may have suffered from porphyria or severe bipolar disorder, conditions made more likely by centuries of genetic compression. And as her madness deepened, the court that once adored her hid her away in silence. She died not as a queen, but as a relic, a woman hollowed out by a crown she never had the choice to refuse. She was called Joanna the Mad, but her story is anything but madness. Born in 1535 to Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, and Isabella of Portugal, Joanna of Austria, was the product of Europe's most elite and most entangled bloodline. Her grandparents were first cousins, her parents were double cousins. Her uncles were also her great-uncles. She was, quite literally, surrounded by mirrors of her own DNA. Joanna was married at 16 to her double cousin, João Manuel of Portugal. He was sickly, pale, and already coughing blood on their wedding day. A year later, he was dead. But Joanna was pregnant, and her son Sebastian would become king. The court rejoiced. But inside Joanna's chambers, the future was already cracking. Her son, King Sebastian, showed early signs of neurological problems. He was emotionally erratic, easily fatigued, and reportedly prone to hallucinations. Some historians believe he may have had epilepsy. Others suggest schizophrenia. Either way, he died young, riding headlong into a Moroccan battlefield at age 24, leaving no heir, no crown, and no legacy. And Joanna? She was widowed, childless, and alone before 40. She never remarried. She retreated into Catholic ritual, whispered to saints, and walked the palace halls with rosaries clenched in bloodless hands. Whether she was mad or merely mourning, no one dared to say. Her silence became her prison. But behind the silence was a scream that echoed through time. She was born of gods wrapped in linen and luxury, but even divine blood can rot. Cleopatra Selene, too, was the daughter of Cleopatra VII and Mark Antony, 2 of the most iconic lovers in history. But that was only half her story. Through her mother, she inherited the Ptolemaic dynasty, a line so obsessed with blood purity, it made marriage to brothers a tradition. Cleopatra VII had likely been married to her own brother, Ptolemy XIII. Her father, Ptolemy XII, had married his sister. Her grandparents were siblings. And so the line stretched back. Generations of incest masquerading as divine right. Cleopatra Selene was born into a genetic pressure cooker. Raised in Rome after her parents' suicides, she was paraded as a trophy, a living symbol of Rome's conquest of Egypt. But in private, she struggled with frailty, frequent illness, pale skin, and what ancient records describe as nervous weakness. Some scholars now speculate she may have suffered from one of the many hereditary disorders that plagued the late Ptolemies. Brittle bones, immunodeficiencies, or autoimmune diseases triggered by chromosomal collapse. Married off to Juba II, king of Mauritania, she became queen of a foreign land. But unlike her ancestors, she didn't repeat the pattern. She raised her children outside the Ptolemaic tradition. No brother-sister marriage. No royal incest. Her reign was brief, her health fragile. But her legacy was quiet defiance, a daughter of bloodline obsession who broke the chain. She was known as Sisi, the Empress of Austria, immortalized in paintings, whispered about in salons, beloved by a nation, and haunted by a bloodline that folded in on itself. Elizabeth of Bavaria was born in 1837 into the House of Wittelsbach, a dynasty already bruised by centuries of intermarriage. Her parents were cousins, their parents' cousins again. Nobility, they believed, must remain noble, even if that meant turning family trees into webs. At just 15, Sisi married Emperor Franz Joseph, her double first cousin. From the outside, she was the very image of imperial elegance, cascading dark hair, a 16-inch waist, poetry on her lips, and diamonds woven into her gowns. But the inside told another story. Her sister Charlotte slipped into psychosis. Her cousin King Ludwig II was declared insane and removed from the throne. Her own children suffered illnesses. Her son Rudolph, brilliant and tortured, died by suicide in what became the infamous Mayerling incident. And Sisi herself? She vanished into solitude. Obsessed with diets, rituals, and her figure, she refused photographs after the age of 30. She wandered from palace to palace, speaking rarely, eating less, hiding always. Some believe she showed signs of severe depression or anorexia, mental illnesses made more likely by hereditary vulnerability. Her assassination in 1898 shocked the empire. But in truth, Sisi had died long before that, piece by piece, lost in grief, vanity, and inherited sorrow. She was born into royalty and lived as its ghost. She wore silk dresses and learned 5 languages by 10. But by 13, she was watching her brothers bleed to death from the smallest cut. Princess Victoria of Hesse, born in 1863, was Queen Victoria's granddaughter, a child of 2 royal houses united through repeated cousin marriages. Her family carried a secret, one they didn't yet understand: hemophilia. Passed silently through the X chromosome, this blood disease made minor injuries fatal. It didn't touch Victoria directly, but she carried it invisibly in her blood. And when she married her cousin Louis of Battenberg, she passed it down to her children. Her son, Prince Maurice, bled to death after a minor fall. Her grandsons inherited the same condition. Even more devastating, Victoria's daughter Alice married Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. Their only son, Alexei, was born a hemophiliac. His suffering would ignite the legend of Rasputin, plunge the Romanovs into mysticism and terror, and, ultimately, help tear down the Russian Empire. Victoria's blood, thick with royal pedigree, carried no flaw visible to the naked eye. But it bled red threads across Europe, threads that unraveled dynasties. She was a mother, a princess, and a silent harbinger of collapse. She walked barefoot through temples once built for gods, and ruled a kingdom beside her brother as his queen. Arsinoë II, born around 316 BCE, was no stranger to power. A Ptolemaic princess, she was the daughter of Ptolemy the Immortan, one of Alexander the Great's generals, and a Macedonian noblewoman. From birth, she was told her blood was divine, that her veins carried the sacred pulse of conquest and empire. So when she married her brother, Ptolemy II, it was not scandal. It was doctrine. Their union was formalized in temples, celebrated in myth. They were crowned as pharaoh and pharaohess, god-kings in mortal form. But beneath the incense and ceremony, their marriage was also a genetic knot. The Ptolemies, determined to preserve their lineage, married sibling to sibling for generations. And the results were clear. Fragile children, mysterious illnesses, sudden deaths, and a haunting pattern of mental instability. Arsinoë herself was powerful, politically shrewd, and beloved by the people. But no heirs survived her. Some historians believe she may have suffered multiple miscarriages or delivered stillborns. The hidden toll of bloodline obsession. And after her death, the dynasty grew only darker. With each new generation, the children of brother-sister unions became weaker, sicker, and madder. She was deified in her lifetime, worshipped after her death, but no divinity could cleanse the bloodlines she helped sanctify. She smiled through rotting teeth and wore gold-threaded gowns to cover a failing body. Margaret Teresa of Spain was born in 1651, the golden child of the Spanish Habsburgs, a dynasty so entangled that her father was also her mother's uncle. Her parents were uncle and niece. Their parents were cousins. Their parents again, cousins. Her ancestry was more braid than tree, a closed loop spiraling toward collapse. From her first portrait, painted at age 2, the signs were already visible. Her lower jaw jutted unnaturally forward. The infamous Habsburg jaw, a deformity so severe it caused difficulty chewing, speaking, even breathing. It wasn't just cosmetic. It was the skull crying out against centuries of repetition. Margaret was married off at 15 to her own maternal uncle, Leopold I, Holy Roman Emperor. The Habsburgs were desperate to preserve the throne, but the cost was staggering. She gave birth to 4 children. Only one lived past infancy, and even that child died before adulthood. Margaret herself died at just 21, exhausted, diseased, and likely suffering from complications tied to her own inbreeding. Her portraits hang today in museums. A little girl with wide skirts, soft curls, and melancholy eyes. But behind the brushstrokes is a dynasty in decay, a body bearing the weight of 1,000 repeated genes. She came to Russia as a bride, tall, pale, and full of promise. She would leave it in blood. Alexandra Feodorovna, born Princess Alex of Hesse in 1872, was a granddaughter of Queen Victoria, and like many royals of her age, the product of intense cousin intermarriage. She was married to Tsar Nicholas II, the last emperor of Russia, and carried with her a hidden genetic legacy. Hemophilia. Her son and heir, Alexei, was born sickly and fragile. A single bruise could become life-threatening. In desperation, Alexandra turned to mystics and faith healers. One man in particular, Grigory Rasputin, promised to heal the boy. And when Rasputin succeeded, even briefly, Alexandra clung to him with religious fervor. The Russian court recoiled. Scandal swirled. Power slipped from the monarchy's grasp. The empress, who had once been seen as cold and shy, was now viewed as mad, manipulated, and dangerous. Her isolation deepened. Her prayers grew louder, and her son, the last hope of the Romanovs, remained in constant pain. In 1918, Alexandra was executed with her entire family in a Siberian basement. It wasn't just war or revolution that ended her dynasty. It was blood, the wrong blood, over and over again. There are no letters, no quotes, no speeches from Blanche of Valois, only silence. Born in 1316 into the House of Valois, an offshoot of the French Capetian dynasty, Blanche came from generations of cousin marriages meant to keep French blood noble. But her arrival was not celebrated. From the moment she was born, Blanche was different. She never crawled properly. She didn't respond to her name. By 4, she still hadn't spoken. Physicians of the time called her cursed. Monks claimed she was born under an evil star. But today we might understand her symptoms as signs of severe neurodevelopmental disability, possibly linked to genetic disorders caused by repeated inbreeding. Blanche was never betrothed. never educated, never crowned. She was hidden, kept in an abbey far from the court, surrounded by nuns who noted her childlike behavior into adulthood. She died quietly, without scandal or ceremony. Her name faded. Her portraits, if they ever existed, are lost. But she remains a haunting symbol of what it meant to be born royal, but not useful. She was royalty by blood, and that blood turned against her. They called her La Loca, Joanna the Mad, but her madness wasn't just in her mind, it was in her veins. Born in 1479 to Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, Joanna of Castile was the daughter of power, and of an ancestry so tangled it read like a riddle. Her parents were second cousins. Her maternal grandparents were cousins again. On every branch of her tree, the same names repeated: Trastamara, Habsburg, Valois. Joanna was intelligent, fluent in Latin, theology, and politics. But her marriage to Philip the Handsome of Habsburg descent unleashed something in her that could not be undone. Philip was unfaithful, cold, manipulative. Joanna became obsessed, possessive. Her mood spiraled. Her grief exploded when he died suddenly in 1506 at age 28. Joanna, unable to accept his death, traveled across Castile with his embalmed corpse in tow, opening the coffin to kiss him goodnight. The court declared her insane. Her father locked her away. Her son, Charles V, kept her imprisoned for decades, using her name but denying her freedom. Was she mad, or mourning, or both, amplified by a genetic predisposition to mental illness? She lived until age 75, alone in a stone convent, pacing endlessly, whispering to ghosts, a queen in title, a prisoner in truth. They were born in gold and buried in silence. From Egypt's marble tombs to Austria's winter palaces, from French abbeys to Spanish cathedrals, these women were not just queens, empresses, or princesses. They were the living consequences of royal obsession. Their lives, and often their deaths, tell a story not written in ink, but encoded in blood. It wasn't sorcery or scandal that brought down some of history's most powerful dynasties. It was genetics, a slow, invisible unraveling. Cousins married cousins. Sisters married brothers. Generations repeated the same names, the same unions, until bodies broke, minds frayed, and children died before they ever lived. And through it all, these women smiled in portraits, sat still for the crown, obeyed. They carried the beauty and burden of power, but behind every jeweled veil was a secret written in their bones. History remembers their titles, but their bodies remember the cost.